Most people believe that if they're not achieving, not producing, not driven, they must be lazy. But what if that's not true? What if laziness isn't a flaw, but a symptom? What if the real problem isn't your motivation, but your training? Laziness is not a moral failing. It is not proof that you lack purpose or potential. It is a neurological state, a condition of the nervous system where the circuits responsible for drive, intention, and forward motion have gone silent from disuse. Your brain was not created to sit still in endless distraction. It was designed to pursue, to build, to focus, to act. But when it does not receive the signals that activate those circuits, when days are filled with passive consumption instead of deliberate effort, the systems that once burned with fire begin to cool. They do not disappear, they fall asleep. And what people label as laziness is actually a body waiting to be reawakened, a mind desperate for direction, a spirit suffocating under the weight of neural inactivity. You are not unmotivated, you are untrained, the circuits are there, the structure is there, the potential is there. But like any system, it must be called upon, engaged, tested, and trained through resistance to come alive again. There are specific areas in the brain that regulate movement, decision, and pursuit. They do not operate based on desire alone. They require input. They require forward action. They require friction. When those inputs are removed, when you stop challenging your mind, stop giving your body a reason to move, stop pursuing something difficult but worthy, the brain defaults to conservation. Not because you're broken, but because it was designed to protect you. The system assumes that if there is no motion, there must be danger. So it suppresses energy, it dulls focus, it slows everything down to preserve what's left. That is not laziness. That is survival mode, and the only way to break it is not through guilt or hype. It is through intentional reactivation of the systems that were created for motion. What the world sees as discipline is simply a nervous system that's been trained to respond to structure. What the world calls consistency is really the byproduct of neural circuits that know what to expect, that fire when action begins, that release the chemicals of energy and reward when effort is made. This is not luck. This is biology. This is wiring, and wiring can be rebuilt. If you felt numb, stagnant, unmotivated, it is not a reflection of who you are. It is a reflection of what your brain has stopped being asked to do. But the moment you begin, even in the smallest ways, to reintroduce intention, movement, focus, and challenge, the dormant circuits begin to stir. The fire begins to return, and the feelings of clarity, energy, and passion don't come from the outside. They rise from within because your brain was not made for delay, it was made for dominion. It was made to take action, to subdue the chaos of the world with order, to push through resistance and step into purpose. And when you treat your laziness not as identity, but as an invitation to train, everything inside of you begins to shift. Focus, discipline, and motivation are not gifts you're born with. They are systems within the brain that must be activated, reinforced, and trained through repeated behavior. They are not reserved for the elite, the successful, or the extraordinary. They are circuits, patterns, and neurochemical feedback loops that respond to repetition and intention. And when they are ignored, they weaken. But when they are trained daily, deliberately, they transform. Every time you choose structure over chaos, effort over ease, direction over distraction, you send a signal to your brain. This is who we are now. And the brain listens, it rewires, it adapts, it becomes what you ask of it. If you demand nothing, it gives you nothing. But if you demand pursuit, it sharpens your clarity. If you demand consistency, it strengthens your will. If you demand more from yourself, it doesn't resist. It responds. Inside the brain are systems specifically built to pursue long-term goals, to delay gratification, and to release dopamine not just in moments of reward, but in the moments of effort. But those systems don't activate on their own. They require behavior to awaken them. This is the principle most people miss. They wait to feel focused before they start. instead of realizing that starting is what creates the focus. They wait to feel motivated before they act, never understanding that it is the act itself that releases the very chemical of motivation. You are not waiting for motivation, you are training for it. You are not lacking discipline, you are building it like a muscle, like a fire. And it is in the repetition, in the friction, in the choice to return to the work that the systems begin to come alive. The prefrontal cortex, your center of decision-making and control, does not grow strong through good intentions. It grows strong through practice. When you wake up early, when you stay locked in, when you ignore the noise and return to the task, that region of the brain thickens, sharpens, stabilizes. The circuitry that once scattered under pressure begins to hold. Your attention no longer drifts, it locks. Your impulses no longer dictate behavior. Your vision does. This is what it means to train the brain. Not through theory, but through repetition, through small daily choices that speak to the biology within you and say, "We are not here for survival. We are here for purpose." That purpose becomes a rhythm, that rhythm becomes a state, that state becomes your identity, and the world will begin to call you focused, disciplined, unstoppable, but you'll know the truth. You'll know that what looks like a gift was really a system forged in fire, built through quiet obedience to structure. Not because it was easy, but because you refused to be ruled by a brain left on autopilot. You took command. You trained it, and in doing so, the moment your eyes fix on a single target, your brain begins to shift. It exits the fog of scattered attention and enters a state of pursuit. This is not imagination, it is wiring. The circuits that control the muscles in your eyes are deeply connected to the circuits that control focus, effort, and motivation. When your gaze is wide and unfocused, your brain interprets it as passive, uncertain, overwhelmed. But when you narrow your vision, when you lock onto one point, one goal, one task, you flip the switch. You activate the same neural systems that ancient hunters used to track prey, the same systems that soldiers use in combat, the same systems that allow an individual to cut through chaos and move. With clarity, vision is not just a sense. It is a command center, and the way you aim your eyes tells your nervous system exactly what to do next. Your focus follows your gaze, your thoughts follow your focus, and your entire biology follows your thoughts. So, when your eyes are scattered across screens, noise, options, and open loops, your mind mirrors that pattern. But the moment you take control of your gaze, you take control of the first lever in the chain of attention. This is where clarity is built, not in the absence of distraction, but in the mastery of where you choose to look. The eyes tell the brain, this matters, and when something matters, your brain begins to prioritize it. It starts filtering out the irrelevant, it boosts activity in the prefrontal cortex, it sharpens attention and suppresses the internal noise. You begin to reclaim your ability to focus not by force, but by direction. This is why every form of meaningful training begins with the eyes. Whether it's athletics, meditation, warfare, or worship, the ability to fix your gaze is the first step to mastering your state. You cannot pursue what you refuse to aim at. You cannot hit what you will not look at. And the brain will not release the chemicals of focus, effort, and reward unless it believes the target is real. When you narrow your vision, you send a signal to your brain, prepare for pursuit. And that preparation unlocks dopamine, elevates norepinephrine, and begins to suppress doubt, fatigue, and hesitation. You feel more engaged, not because the task got easier, but because your nervous system got aligned. When you feel scattered, overwhelmed, unfocused, it is not a crisis of character. It is a crisis of direction. And the first step in restoring direction is found in your eyes. Fix your gaze and your body will follow. Fix your gaze and your mind will obey. Fix your gaze and the systems designed for pursuit will rise again. Not because you forced them, but because you finally aimed them. Your vision is not just about seeing. It is about becoming. And when you choose where to look, you are choosing who you will become. Breath is the first language your nervous system understands. Before words, before thought, before action, breath speaks, and the way you breathe determines the message your body hears: chaos or calm, panic or presence, paralysis or pursuit. When you're stuck, distracted, or anxious, the breath shifts without your permission. It becomes shallow, sharp, uncontrolled. And that pattern is not neutral, it's a signal. It tells your brain, we are under threat. It sends that message straight to your heart, to your muscles, to your focus. Your nervous system locks down, your thoughts spiral, but what most people don't realize is that you can speak back. You can override the signal. You can flip the state of your entire physiology by deliberately changing how you breathe. There is a God-designed structure in your system called the vagus nerve, a communication superhighway between your brain and your body. And when you take a slow, deep breath in through your nose and release it with a long, extended exhale, you activate that nerve like a sacred key. It unlocks the parasympathetic system, the one responsible for calm, clarity, and recovery. It shuts down the panic loop. It grounds the heart rate. It restores blood flow to the parts of the brain that plan, focus, and execute. This isn't abstract, it's measurable. Breath isn't just a tool, it's a weapon against fear, against confusion, against the lie that you are trapped in your own mind. Specific breathing patterns like the physiological sigh, a double inhale through the nose followed by a long exhale, can lower stress levels in seconds. Box breathing, equal inhale, hold, exhale, hold, can stabilize focus and emotional control in the middle of pressure. These are not spiritual metaphors. They are biological keys. They are how warriors, athletes, and leaders regulate themselves in the fire. And they are available to you at all times. You don't need a device. You don't need a breakthrough. You need one breath taken with intention, repeated until your system remembers what calm feels like again. Every breath you take is either reinforcing chaos or restoring control. And when you take control of your breath, you are not just calming yourself down. You are building capacity. You are increasing your ability to stay locked in when the world demands that you fall apart. You are training your nervous system to listen to command, not to crisis. That is authority. That is mastery. That is the beginning of transformation. The breath becomes your anchor, your access point to power. It becomes your reminder that the storm may rage around you, but it does not own you. You own your state. You own your response. You own your biology, because the one who designed your breath also designed your victory, and he placed the switch in your lungs waiting for you to activate it with courage. Small wins are not small to your brain. They are everything. The nervous system doesn't wait for giant victories to release dopamine, the molecule of motivation. It responds to forward progress, no matter how minor it may seem. Every action you take toward a goal, every task completed, every step forward, every moment you choose movement over stagnation tells your brain, we are in pursuit. And that signal flips the entire system. You begin to shift out of hesitation and into momentum, not because the world changed, but because you took control of the inputs. This is the science of how identity is built not through fantasy or wishing, but through effort. Effort rewires the brain. Effort sends the message that we are alive, we are moving. We are no longer stuck in the loop of delay and doubt. This is the difference between those who stay stuck and those who rise, not talent, not opportunity, but the decision to pursue the small win with everything they have. When you choose one task and complete it, you teach your nervous system that action is possible. That success is possible, that the path is open, and when dopamine is released in response to that effort, it creates a feedback loop. You don't just feel better, you're drawn to take another step. You start to crave progress. You begin to associate movement with reward. That association becomes a chain reaction. And soon, the very systems that once made you freeze begin to fire with purpose. Not because you waited for motivation, but because you trained your brain to find joy in the pursuit itself. Most people miss this because they're chasing big breakthroughs. They want the dopamine hit of finishing the race, but refuse to honor the power of the first step. But the brain doesn't wait until you finish. It rewards you for beginning. This is divine design. The small things matter because they teach you to trust yourself. They teach your body that when you set a goal, you act. And that trust builds confidence. That confidence becomes consistency. That consistency becomes character, and character becomes destiny. But it starts with one action, repeated, honored, owned. When you stack small wins, your nervous system stops resisting the path and starts reinforcing it. You create momentum that no outside motivation can match. This is how legacies are built, one moment of obedience at a time. You show up when it's boring, you act when it's hard. You execute when no one is watching, and your brain responds. It begins to release power, clarity, and hunger that were dormant inside you the whole time. Not because you finally arrived, but because you finally moved. The world may not notice that first step, but heaven does, and your nervous system absolutely does. It records that moment as a spark, a declaration, a new standard, and from that point forward, you are no longer someone who waits. You are someone who walks. Avoiding overstimulation isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Your brain was never designed to handle constant inputs of novelty, reward, and noise. Every notification, every scroll, every instant hit of dopamine from entertainment, food, or distraction teaches the nervous system to expect effort, free pleasure. And over time, that expectation destroys the motivation circuits. The baseline level of dopamine begins to drop. The receptors grow numb, the reward system becomes desensitized. So when it's time to actually do something that requires effort, study, train, build, focus, the brain doesn't respond. It feels dull, heavy, flat, not because the task is too hard, but because the system has been hijacked. Hijacked by endless stimulation, by synthetic pleasure, by habits that make the mind dependent on external triggers just to feel alive. But this is reversible. The brain is not lazy, it's adaptive. And when you start to reduce stimulation, when you stop giving it cheap highs, it doesn't die. It begins to reset. It begins to crave depth instead of speed, purpose instead of escape, and what once felt boring begins to feel meaningful again. You start to find reward in the effort itself. That's how you restore motivation, by creating a contrast between hard-earned satisfaction and empty, instant gratification. It's not about cutting everything out, it's about reclaiming control, about teaching your nervous system to pursue things that build you, not break you. This is why practices like fasting, stillness, silence, solitude, even just delaying gratification for minutes, are so powerful. They sharpen the edges of your desire. They wake up the ancient parts of your brain that were made to pursue, not passively consume. When you step away from overstimulation, you begin to feel the weight of real joy again, not the crash of overindulgence, but the rise of earned confidence. The steady flood of dopamine that comes from knowing you did something hard and didn't run. This is how warriors are built, not through constant stimulation, but through restraint. Through the discipline of saying, no, this doesn't rule me anymore. Every time you delay the easy hit, you make the hard path more rewarding. Every time you choose silence over noise, you allow your thoughts to reorganize. Every time you say no to the artificial and yes to the authentic, you reclaim another piece of your power. Your brain starts to remember what it was created for, not constant distraction, but focused pursuit. It begins to listen to internal command instead of external chaos, and that's when the system wakes up. That's when motivation is no longer a mystery. It becomes the fruit of alignment, of intention, of restraint that leads to release, discipline that leads to desire. You are not weak for turning down the noise. You are wise, because you know that what you starve dies, and what you feed lives. And when you starve overstimulation, the fire of your calling begins to burn again.